Good evening, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Helotes City Council. It's March 14th, 2019, and we're underway at 7 p.m. Before we get started on our agenda, we have a scout visiting with us tonight, Lucas Fitzgerald. Lucas, stand up so we can see who you are. Lucas is here from Troop 401. They meet at Helotes Hills Methodist Church, and he's working on his communications merit badge. Like I said, if you have any questions, if you stay after the meeting, we'll be very glad to help you out. You betcha. Okay, next up we have the invocation tonight. That'll be handled by Council Member Massey, and then we'll have the pledges to the American and Texas flag. So if you would please stand for the invocation and pledges.
Dear Lord, I'd like to thank you for this beautiful day and for the beginning of the spring season. I ask for blessings on our city and our staff and safety for our first responders. I also ask for wisdom as we deliberate over tonight's agenda. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Okay, our first item is citizens to be heard. Selena, have anybody sign up?
No.
No? Nobody? Good. And public hearing is next. And I will open the public hearing at 7:02. And this public hearing is to give all interested persons the right to appear and be heard on a request by Dunkin' Donuts for a specific city council approved use permit for a restaurant with drive-through facility at Helotes Crossing Shopping Center, a multi-tenant shopping center on property zoned overlay district B3 OD, located at 12423 Bandera Road, Helotes, Texas, 78023, more particularly described as BCAD property ID number 239951.
Nobody.
Nobody? Mm-mm. Well, then we will close this public hearing at 7:03. Next up is our consent agenda. For those of you that are not familiar with this type of a meeting, a consent agenda is just a grouping together of multiple items that I, along with the staff, consider to be fairly routine. The objective is to have the council give one motion and 1 second to take action on the items in the consent agenda. However, if they have a question on an item and we can answer that fairly quickly, we'll address it. Otherwise, they can ask to have an item pulled. It'll drop down into the rest of the, or the bottom of the agenda and be discussed with the other individual items. So at this time, I would ask, we have consent agenda items 4 through 7. Are there any questions or requests to pull an item? Okay, none being heard, I would ask for a motion and a second to approve consent agenda items 4 through 7.
Mr. Mayor, I moved we approve and vote on consent agenda items 4 through 7.
I have a motion from Meadows. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Buys. No discussion, no questions. We'll call the question. All in favor of approving consent agenda items 4 through 7, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. That takes us to item number 8. And again, this is discussion of an action on a request by Dunkin' Donuts for a specific city council approved use permit for a restaurant with drive-through facility at Helotes Crossing Shopping Center. So if I can have a motion and a second, please.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to discuss and take action on 8.
Have a motion from Buys. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Blue. So a motion from Buys, second from Blue. Bert, it's your motion, so you're first up.
Okay, I'd like to agree with the Planning and Zoning Commission on their recommendation for approval of this. I know we've done this for other businesses in our city, the same thing, and I think it's going to be a good thing for them. The only question I had was, and I guess Rick probably can answer this for me, is the drainage requirements and all the other things going to be coming back to us too?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that is, okay, all right, but I am for this agenda item.
Okay, Alex?
I completely agree. I don't see a problem at all with the drive-through in that location.
Jim?
No questions. I totally concur with you.
Cynthia?
I'm fine with it.
Okay, no further discussion being required. We will call the question then. All in favor of approving item number 8 as written, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries 4-0. Number 9 is a discussion of an action on a request by Pulte Homes of Texas, LP, for approval of a residential subdivision entry sign located near the intersection of Gome Road and Mill Park. So if I can have a motion and a second to discuss and take action on item number 9, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we discuss and take action on number 9 as written.
Have a motion from Massey. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Meadows. Okay, Cynthia, your motion.
The only question I have is, the P and Z's recommendation was to make it, this is number 9.
Right.
Let's see what it said. To reduce it so that it would be 181.25 square feet, which is 25% discretionary. And they said the new front curved portion is understood to be the sign. So I'm trying to understand, looking at the picture, are they talking about the brick wall, or are they just
Yes.
talking about the sign?
No, they're talking about the brick wall or rock wall, and the staff figured the footage for just the white area with Silver Canyon on it, and that falls within the parameters of what's allowable.
Yeah, I don't think that the entire wall is a sign.
No, we don't either.
So I'm against if that's what they think is a sign, it's not. This part, if it's in the parameters of a sign, if that's the sign,
Okay, this is the existing, the proposed will be on
Oh.
on the next sheet. They're looking at this to here, and the height. The staff is looking at this, and we all agree that that should be the sign area, and that's what they say is in compliance with the sign ordinance.
right, okay. Either way, it was this,
Yeah,
that's the sign.
right. This is the proposed one.
Right. Well, I think that looks fine, and I think it's within our parameters.
It is, yeah.
So I'm fine with that.
Okay. Jim, you're second, so you have any comments?
No, I concur. I wonder 10 years down the road if their yucca plants or whatever they're proposing there.
Yeah, I know.
Overgrow their signs.
They're probably dwarf.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing.
Other than that, I don't really have any comments.
But hey, it's Pulte Homes, they
Yeah.
must know what they're doing, right?
Yeah,
That
we're
it?
gonna have to take care of this.
Any more?
No.
Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the sign is a considerable improvement upon what's there, which is clearly outside of the boundaries of our ordinance. I know Planning and Zoning had a concern about the size. Our ordinances do include the wall that it's on as part of the sign. That's the way all of our monument signs and neighborhood entrance signs read. So technically, they're correct in not including only the part with the Silver Canyon, but the entire wall. They had a lot of debate during the Planning and Zoning meeting about whether or not to include the 2 side sections, which really are only part of the planter. I don't have a problem at all with the size of the sign, even though it goes slightly above what the ordinance. I think it looks great, and I think it can be a welcome attraction in that area, especially landscaped however they plan to do so. I know there's going to be a number of trees they're planting as well, some of which will be in that planter that's behind the Silver Canyon sign. The one thing I just want to confirm is that all the flags which are technically not permitted by our ordinance will be coming down, and I've been assured by our city administrator that is the case. So I'm fine with the sign as presented, not as planning and zoning recommended.
Okay. Bert?
So they're doing this because that sign out there is not in compliance? Is that, or why are they doing this? Just because the
I'm
sign up-
assuming that if you remember when they brought it to us before, and Rick can add or comment on this as well, but you remember they had all the flag poles and
Yeah,
it was way oversized.
still do.
It's in yeah, but they're gonna replace that with this. So I'm assuming they figured they wouldn't get that approved, so this is what they're gonna do.
Well, they're
Is that
spending,
pretty much it? Yeah,
they're spending a lot of money to do that. Okay, no, I'm fine with it. I didn't have anything else.
okay. Any follow-up, Cynthia?
No, so then, okay, no,
Jim, any follow-up?
Just further discussions that's implied in my second is that the flags and everything are coming down as part of the re-signing. So,
Yeah, it'll look like this,
Yeah.
with
right.
no flag poles. This is what they presented.
The only thing else I would add, Mr. Mayor, thank you, is that the lighting on there is, it may or may not be technically compliant because it is not full cutoff and downward facing, but it is landscape lighting and will shine on the sign as well. And I think that part of the variance we're talking about, just to put on record, is to allow the lighting that they have requested, despite the fact that it does require that variance on our part.
Okay,
And I don't have a problem with it either, given where it's located. It's not like a wall sign or a other kind of sign. I think it's different here.
all right. Bert, any follow-up?
No.
So your suggestion was to include the lighting as requiring a variance?
Doesn't it?
Because it's not, I don't think it does if it.
I think in this instance, the whole package is the
Includes
sign.
the lighting.
It includes the lighting, so I think just.
That's the way I
You've
interpret it.
mentioned it, you've put it on the record that it may or may not be in compliance, and so I would just vote on the motion as presented.
Yeah, that's why
Right,
I was.
and that's why I mentioned it, so that
Yeah.
it wasn't overlooked in the fact
Right.
that way. I don't have a problem with it, but I think that because it was referenced, and I know that in the material that was presented to planning and zoning, and they didn't have a problem with it either, but because it is technically in that gray area about whether it does or doesn't comply, I wanted to make sure it was on record that we are approving the lighting as presented as well.
Okay, that can go into the minutes. It doesn't need to be on the motion, but the lighting and the fixtures are on the application, so it is part of the whole package. So that being said, the motion will, or a yes vote will approve the proposed entrance sign with the lighting, and the note will be made in the minutes that the lighting is iffy on compliance. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Number 10, discussion of an action on a request by Helotes Gallery for approval of a wall sign. So if we can have a motion and a second.
Mayor, I make a motion to discuss and take action on 10.
Motion from Baez, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
And a second from Blue. So Bert, it's your motion, you're up.
Once again, I agree with P and Z's recommendation for approval of this request by the Helotes Gallery.
Okay. Alex?
I concur. I think it's a nice sign, and it fits very well with Old Town.
Okay, Jim?
No comments. I concur.
Cindy?
I'm fine with it.
Okay. Sounds like we're ready to call the question. All in favor of approving the Helotes Gallery sign, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. And the sign is approved. That wasn't too tough, was it? Number 11, discussion of an action on a request by Carrington Hadley LLC to repeal ordinance number 337, section 4, regulating site vegetation and grading and approval of a conceptual site plan for a townhome development located on Iron Horse Way near its intersection with Antonio Road. And I'll call your attention to a revised site plan, should be in that grouping right there. That's the parade route, that's the revised site plan. Because they did add some things to make it a little more clear as to the amount of green space and some other notes that they had neglected to put on the site plan. But we will look at taking a motion and a second on this. Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I make motion we discuss, take action on 11.
We have a motion from Buys. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Massey. So Bert, you're up.
You know, after looking at this and everything, I think it's a very good design. I think it's reducing in townhome lots from 46 to 35, even though they're probably gonna be more expensive, is a good thing. It also, I think the developer even went so far as to acquire more property, from Mann, was that the person?
Yeah.
And he's up to almost 40% green space for this townhome development. I like it. It looks like what we have to do with according to the agenda item, what we have to do is we're just getting rid of section 4 of the ordinance, is that right? That's what we're doing. So this doesn't have, and it does not have to go to a planned unit development either, is that correct? Okay. Now, I do have a question. Has the fire department looked at this?
The fire department typically doesn't get into these conceptual reviews until when they submit construction documents, and then the fire marshal will review it.
Okay. All right.
I mean, yes, it is gonna have to comply with the International Fire Code.
And all the other codes.
Okay. It looks like to me the developer, in my mind, has bent over backwards to try to get this development done, and in my mind, I like it. That's all I have.
Okay, and as it said in the background information, as I recall, he did meet with the HOA over there, and they pretty well worked with him on this as well. Cynthia?
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Buys on this. I think that they've done a really good job of coming back with the suggestions that were given to them. I do have a question about the back. Okay, I'm looking, this 180-foot, is it from the street
Yes.
to the, okay, so it's, instead of 180 feet, it's gonna be 29, about 30 feet from, the development's gonna start about 30 feet from the street. Is that correct?
Yeah, it'll start where that dark dashed line is. That's the rock wall, which is on the property
Oh, but it's
line.
gonna have a rock wall
Yeah, he's
there.
gonna put a 6-foot rock wall across there, and he's extending the sidewalk from in front of his project. It'll go all the way to Spotted Horse with a
Right.
6-foot sidewalk.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's a really nice feature too, so I'm fine with this.
Okay, Jim?
Just a quick question for staff. Is there any requirement, once we've voided this, our grading requirement, that they put it back into a good condition? Is there anything written as far as the landscaping?
Well, that'll be when he does his project.
Right.
And does all the finish work, yeah.
Okay, but
Yeah, this will be considered a commercial development up until it's sold. So they're gonna have to comply with the,
Landscape.
with the landscape, but many of the codes that commercial developments have to, in the way of stabilization and grading and all of those sorts of things.
so if it's regarded as a commercial project, we'll get another bite at it as far as the landscaping and,
Landscaping is reviewed administratively
Right.
by the city arborist, and so the city arborist hasn't looked at this plan in the way of tree preservation or anything yet. Again, we're just trying to get the conceptual down so that they can go back and do the construction documents and things that they need, and then we can start the administrative review process.
I would just note that in Los Reyes, we've had multiple issues now with contractors coming in and doing the tear out quite nicely, and they never come back and do the restoration. And so when we get that chance, we need to make sure that they're covering that under the commercial.
Yeah, it is definitely covered on the commercial side.
Okay.
The residential, as we've discussed, is a little bit more tricky, and I know the mayor and staff are working on a certificate of occupancy process that would address that for single-family residential.
Right. No, and I understood that it's judged as a commercial project. I'm just noting for the record that we need to make sure the follow-up is there for, they're just not left in a stage of, all right, we've torn up, we've got our work done, we're out of here.
Yeah, it can't because it's subject to the MS4 requirements, and so it has to be stabilized and replanted and things of that sort.
Okay, that's all I had.
And again, it's just section 4. We have the original ordinance in here, 377. So Rick and the staff just put this ordinance spelled out in basic terms, what it's going to eliminate out of that ordinance 377, but it just pertains to this particular parcel.
Good.
Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a considerable improvement. I wish somebody from the homeowner association had been here to confirm that they liked it as well, since they were pretty vocal about not liking the first one, but then when you get something that's better, they don't seem to come here and give us their opinion there. I like the idea that there's that rock wall there. I would hope that as they continue to develop it, that, as I recall, one of the concerns from some of the people that came and spoke the last time was the blind exiting from that area, and I would hope that they don't do what some of the Iron Horse Canyon neighborhoods have done, and that is to plant vegetation that gets so high that you can't see when you're trying to leave the neighborhood. And so hopefully that they would plant lower things right next to the entrance so that you can see oncoming traffic. But I think the design plan is fine, and with that design plan, I have no problem with the revoke or the repealing of that portion of the ordinance.
Okay. Bert, any follow-up?
Yeah, also, I believe, if I remember right, reading this agenda, he's also putting in a sidewalk at the developer's expense. Is that correct?
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't believe the developer's bending over backwards. So, yes, sir, I'm still for this project.
Cynthia, any follow-up?
I just have a question. Do we know how many are they all going to be two-story?
There'll be a
No.
combination of both, but I don't know
Single
exactly.
and two?
Two-story?
Yes.
Okay, that's,
That is
Dale, do
still
you know
correct.
yet what you're going to be doing? It's in design. Okay. There will be a mix.
there will be a mix.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Or there may be a mix, I think is,
Maybe a mix.
maybe a mix.
They're going to look at the best use that they can get out of the lots, I'm sure.
Well, the reason I just mentioned that is because some of the derisive comments, one was, if this is for, elderly people, they're not gonna be wanting to go up the stairs and stuff like that, that's all, I think it would be nice to have a few single-story, just for, couples who are on their own now and don't have children. I know that there's gonna be people here with children, but it would be nice to have some for that. 'Cause
Sure.
that's one of the things that we've always really wanted around here. So anyway, that's all.
Okay. Jim, any follow-up?
Nope.
Alex?
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay. We'll call the question then. All in favor of approving the repeal of ordinance 337, section 4, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. We go on to number 12, discussion of an action on an ordinance amending Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 58, offenses and miscellaneous provisions, Article 2, alarms and alarm systems. So if I can have a motion and a second, please.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to discuss take action on 12.
We have a motion from Byes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Meadows. Okay, Bert, you're up again.
I've got a couple of questions about this, about the, when I read through the ordinance, it seems to, in my mind, it's just covering police alarms. I don't see anything in here about media alerts, fire alarms, and stuff like that. Is that in a different ordinance or something, or am I not reading this ordinance right?
This does just cover security alarms, from my understanding.
Why don't we?
Well, security alarms have medical alert buttons and everything on there too.
I'm thinking, in my mind, you should regulate, because, I mean,
We have nothing in the code currently that would regulate false fire alarms.
and what about media alerts?
No-
Because whenever I
nothing-
was,
Nothing to my knowledge in the code.
in my previous job, I mean, we had people with media alerts going off, all the time too, and they can be, I mean, you might have a fire truck on a false alarm that doesn't need to be, and especially if they're gonna come over and over and over again. I would suggest putting in the fire and Medi-Alert alarms also, just food for thought, okay? And then I also I'm confused by the number and the fines. Under section 58-14 penalty, section A, under number 1, it says, if a property or structure has had more than 3 but fewer than 6 false alarm notifications in the preceding 12-month period, the fee is $50. So if it's more than 3, that means 4. If it's fewer than 6, it's 5. Okay, got that? Maybe I'm not comprehending, the light bulb didn't come on. Okay, and then in the next one, it goes, under B, it says, if it has had more than 5, which is 6, and fewer than 8, which is 7.
That's right.
Okay, so
got it.
I'm confused. I mean, to me, we should try to figure out a better way to put down, hey, you've had 5 alarms, you're gonna be fined $50. You've had 7 alarms, you're gonna be fined $75. I mean, to me, this is a little vague. And then if you go into C, if the property or structures had more than 8, which is 9, I'm sorry, or more false alarms notification, the fee is $100. Well, then, if you have 8, you don't get a fine at all, because 8 isn't covered. Does that make sense?
It does, sir.
Normally it would, but coming from you,
coming
I'm
from
not
me?
sure.
Gotcha.
I'm gonna, if I can, Mayor,
for it.
defer the questions to,
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Andrea's here.
so-
She's the expert, but.
Andrea,
but
I'm sorry, I
the
thought
way
Rick did
The way
this.
I'm reading this is more or less according to the new code, right? Yeah.
And actually,
So
and-
it's not something that we made up.
Is this something that comes from the legislature?
yes.
Yes.
Are you kidding me?
The way that it's
I-
written
identify
for
who you are, if
this,
you would.
I'm Andrea Goff from the Helotes Municipal Court. This is actually under the local government code, chapter
This-
214.
This verbiage?
The
sorry
verbiage
to
is
interrupt.
actually in there, yes.
Yes.
What?
It's the penalty part in that section.
It has to read this way.
Okay,
Yeah,
so I'm
that-
gonna
But
make.
that's how it's-
I'm
that's
gonna
how
make
it's
sure that I
listed in
have
there.
8 false alarms so I don't get charged.
That, I will tell you, that is, the real reason that we're bringing this up right now is because,
No, it's a good thing. I understand.
well, we already have it on the books. The way we have it on the books is not in compliance with state law in the fine schedule that we have. We just have a blanket, I think, fee for these things, and
It's
so.
not listed.
it's over
There's no section for enforcement for like after so many alarms. So like after the 8 alarms or 9 alarms, after
it's-
those penalties,
It's actually
then it's gonna
more
give
than 8.
them the option to be cited. So they can be cited by the police officer or the code enforcement officer for having more than 8 false alarms.
But
And-
I do think that the councilman has a valid point.
Yes.
That while the intent of the legislature might have been something, we can certainly clear that language up
Well, I
in the
mean, it
code
just-
before.
I mean, for staff, to me, I'm sorry, can I speak?
You already are.
Okay.
It's your turn.
You've interrupted
Okay.
everybody else.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, for you guys, this is gonna be tough. I mean, somebody's gonna come in and say, hey, wait a minute. I've had fewer than 9. I've had 8.
Where we could probably have it more, like, clear for people to understand it is probably in the section, our fee schedule. For our, like, our local
If I may, I mean,
fee
the way
schedule.
that I'm interpreting it is, because you're saying that if they don't have 8, they won't be charged, but they will be charged.
They'll be
because
charged.
if they have
But why not?
more
why
than
not-
5 but fewer than
Well,
8. So if you
what-
have
Why
an
not make
8
it
alarm
simple?
call, you'll be charged $75. It's
And
not
you'll
that
be
they
cited.
won't, they will be charged.
Would you care to explain it again or run through it again so we'll all be sure
I
to
understood
I
what
don't
you were
think I
saying.
could.
Yeah, they
We'll
will be
figure it out.
charged.
We'll figure
The
it out.
technical point, I think I'm forced to agree with, that exactly 8
Yeah,
is not covered.
Okay, but I mean, and then one other thing, is there anything about Medi-Alerts and fire alarms? No.
There aren't any, not in this code, not in this section. But we can
I would
later add,
I would
I guess.
work on doing that.
No, the problem, you're talking about 8, is that they have more twice in here, which is what messes it up. All you have to do is take one of the mores out. If the property or structure has had more than 8 let's see, are more false
I think I'm
alarm.
losing control.
Anyway, yeah, I'm sorry.
It's Bert's turn. So
Has
Bert,
had 8 or more.
Yeah,
Bert, are you done before we have a mob here?
I'm almost sorry I brought it up, but yes, I'm done, sir.
I'm very sorry. Okay, Cynthia, you're up, so
So that'll
you
fix
try
it.
and
If you
explain
ju-
it.
On number C, if you just put, if the property or structure has had 8 or more false alarms.
exactly.
Then it includes 8. 8 is not out of the picture then.
Right.
Okay,
I hope that, okay. But I mean, I knew that you got this from the government, the government code or whatever, and this is the kind of language that they use.
I don't know if anyone besides Bert would intentionally get 8 false alarms so they wouldn't have to pay anything, but you never know.
I'm
No,
gonna
but
get
he
me
would have had to pay for the 3 or the 5 or
Yes,
all
ma'am.
the other ones by the time they get, they goes,
But
well,
getting that
this time I
3
got 8.
Yeah,
If he
okay,
gets them all in one day, he could
Just put the,
skip
leave
the
the
fine.
more,
Yeah.
more than, you're okay.
okay, so
That's fine.
you done?
Yeah.
Okay. Jim?
After receiving the mathematics lesson, I reluctantly concur with Councilman Wise, and I think what Councilman Massey said, just cutting out the extra more would cover it if we're allowed to do that without violating, being in compliance.
Yeah,
We've met the spirit and
Okay.
intent.
yeah, we can do it. We're not afraid of anybody. That it?
I know you are afraid of at least one person in this room.
True. Alex, anything?
I had a question, if I may. I can clearly tell that the more than or less than, et cetera, results in a fee, but not a citation. Is that correct?
So after those 8 alarms, then they can actually physically be cited for.
What would that citation involve?
It would, so the max fine on it would be $500. So the false alarm penalty is actually in the penal code under chapter 42. So the max fine for it would be $500.
So on the 9th one, they get the fee plus a citation.
Plus the
Which
citation.
could very well, that'll force them to court to determine.
And I know they.
To fix the problem.
We used to, let me know if this is still correct, but after the first one, the PD sends out a letter to that person
And they still do that.
advising them that they have had that false alarm, and then they tell you what is coming if you have more this is within a 12-month period, right?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
that is correct.
But yes, it's something that we can certainly clarify on that, and fear not, we will do so.
And I'm fine with it, assuming they can enforce it.
Okay,
that's
yeah,
up to
they'll
them.
take care of it. They've been doing this for years. We're just trying to clean up the language and make it comply with the Texas Local Government Code.
That's all,
Okay,
thank you.
Bert, I hesitate to ask, but do
Oh,
you,
no.
do you have any follow-up?
Well, yeah, I would look into the Medi Alert and fire alarms also.
Yes,
I
We
know
will
it
do
was
that.
the third time I said it. Okay, no, nothing else, sir.
I believe that's the 5th time.
Okay.
No,
Cynthia, any
it's the 8th
follow-up?
time.
I just have,
Exactly.
More than the third, less than 6.
if
could
the
be.
intent,
Yeah,
if the intent is to start the problem at 3, right? then- So just say, if the property or structure has 4 but fewer than 6. The more than is what's messing everything up in each one of those, in A and B.
Yeah.
Maybe say like between 4 and 6.
Yeah.
Just say 4 or 5.
we'll make sure it
Just look at
complies
it so
with
that it
the
makes sense.
code.
That's all. The way it's written is, it is, and I hate
It's
to
wordsy.
admit that Councilmember Wise actually made sense after a while.
Now, wait a minute. Let's not go too far here.
I do not accept the preamble that he made sense. I do accept the conclusion.
Okay. Jim, any follow-up?
No.
Alex?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay, well, we'll let the motion stand as it is, because we will fix the little mores and other stuff and make sure it makes sense. So without further ado, we'll call the question. All in favor of this new ordinance, amending the Municipal Code of Ordinance, Chapter 58, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
You really sounded like you knew what you were talking about. Okay, number 13, discussion of and action on amendments to City of Helotes Personnel Policy and Procedures Manual. And Rick can address any questions, but we need a motion and a second, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we discuss and take action on 13 as written.
We have a motion from Massey. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
A second from Buys. Okay, Cynthia?
One of the things I noticed in here is that we had always, overtime is payment, right? And compensatory time is
Is time off.
time off. But for the most part, we always just had the time off. Did we not have overtime? Have we always?
No,
paid
we've
over-
always had both.
Okay, I don't know why, because it looked like in here that was added. So all the red is new.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I have to say, that was, this little timekeeping roles and responsibilities was really confusing to me, but I'm not the one that has to deal with it. And where did this information come from? Another manual somewhere, or?
We created the executive policies in-house. And while we were making the changes to the rest of the personnel policy to make sure it complied with FLSA, we added in the executive time policy so that it was standardized in the policy.
Okay. Well, I went through there and, so, because see, overtime was added so many different places and it wasn't there before.
That is, I think.
One is for non-exempt employees,
Yeah,
and so now non-exempt employees do get overtime?
they already did. That's just clarifying that they get both, because in the policy, it said that they can get both in different places, and so now we just added in that section that they can get both. But they've always been able to get both compensatory time or overtime, depending on what they chose.
Yeah, when you say both, it's either or.
Either or, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay. But exempt employees,
Exempt employees do not get overtime. They do qualify for comp time, at straight time, which means hour for hour.
right, okay. All right, well, that was all I had about this.
Okay, Bert?
The question I have about is the swiping deals that the employees do now. Does police and fire and dispatch do that too?
Yes.
How does that work with with shift personnel? I mean, because what if an officer, let's say Officer Wolfington wants to come in early for a fellow officer? I mean, because they have something to do that day, or they need to work a couple hours for them during the day.
If
I can
they're-
see it working for the 8 hour a day.
If they're actually working, they should clock in.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't see how it works for shift personnel. I mean, because what if you want to come in early for somebody, or you want to stay late
They would-
because somebody has something to do? How does that work for them?
They
I
would
don't get
clock
it.
in, or they would clock out.
But then how do you keep track of they're either going to have more or less hours? You understand
Yes.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, they are gonna have more or less hours.
But, okay, so what they could do is they could work a couple hours here, and then they could get paid back by the same person, not have to, and then there'd be no overtime. You understand what I'm saying? What we used to do in the fire department was if somebody had an emergency, we'd go work for them, and they owe us 6 hours. How do you do that with a swiping deal? That doesn't make any sense.
If they physically, well, that person didn't work then, so they wouldn't have swiped in. But the person who did swap did work, and so they get the additional hours.
But I'm going to pay back the hours on another shift. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
Okay,
FLSA frankly says that swaps don't exist. We don't keep them on the books, nothing. So if an employee is going to swap with somebody, then they do it between themselves, and when you show up, you clock in and you clock out, period, end of story. It's like it never happened.
I probably need to talk to you about this, or maybe talk to some of the shift workers, see if she's shaking her head. Because I don't see how that works with them. I really don't, because you're going to be paying people overtime when they're really not on overtime. They're just filling in for somebody, and then they're going to get their hours back. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The
It's
police,
like
police officers are on 40-hour weeks. They're not on, they're
Yeah,
just
but
like.
what if they want to need an hour early to get off to go do something?
They know the system is there, and they know how to use it, and they would work through
If they,
their supervisors.
what would, and I don't mean to get into a back and forth, but what is, if they leave early, they're not working and they're not eligible for compensation. If they come in early and they're working, they're eligible for compensation. And they're on a 40-hour work week, just like everybody else is.
I don't think you're getting what I'm saying. Okay? They're
Abe,
gonna
do
pay
you
back,
understand
they're
what-
gonna pay back the time. You know,
This,
If you would, please come to the
yeah,
podium.
go ahead.
I don't know.
Hi, Council. My name's April Newby. I'm with Human Resources. So you're basically saying, and to clarify with everybody, so he's saying that somebody's gonna come in and work for their fellow employee, and then I guess that fellow employee is gonna do the same thing. So say they come in for 6 hours. On their next shift, that employee is gonna come and work 6 hours for them. We don't do that. I don't think in any of the departments here. We do not allow for that. So anytime an employee's here
I don't,
working,
April?
we're legally required to pay them.
Okay, well, I don't, you have to understand, these guys, I'm gonna talk about fire, and I'm sure police too. They're working 48 hours now.
Yeah.
That's straight. Let's say they need 6 hours off because of a family deal, and what they're gonna do is they're gonna have one of their fellow firefighters come in and work that 6 hours for them. They go do what they need to do with their family, they come back, they owe that other firefighter 6 hours, and they will pay him back when they need it.
Yes,
That's
but-
part of
then-
shift work.
But either
then-
way, there's still, but either way,
He's not,
it doesn't matter because either way, they're getting paid for the hours that they're working.
if you work more than your 56 hours in fire, you're getting overtime. No, that's not what they're trying to do. They're not trying to charge the city for just having the right to trade time.
Firefighters are only getting paid for, within a 28-day period for over 212 hours.
Perhaps it would be a good idea for you to sit down with April and Rick.
I'd like to sit down
Another time.
with the firefighters and police
Well, then
officers
you
too.
could do that.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
But right now, just know that what you're saying is not typically allowed here, but it will work however it's gonna work because it's a proven system. But you can go ahead and talk to all of those guys later. Okay?
To me, for
Anything?
shift work employees, it handcuffs them.
Well, I can tell you in factories and other places where there's a lot of shift works, there's time clocks. So it works for shift workers.
Okay, that's your opinion.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. Jim?
I would not even begin to start with that. No, I have no other question.
Okay. Alex?
I have thoughts on it as well, but I don't think it's relevant to the passing of this as well, so.
Okay.
Nothing further.
Cynthia, anything else?
No, I'm fine with what is presented here.
Okay. Bert?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I,
And you go.
can I clarify something?
Sure.
Just so that I understand where you're coming from, Councilman. If somebody comes in to work for somebody else because they can't show up for their shift, that person who came in is going to clock in, correct?
Yeah, right.
Have to.
They have to clock in.
Yeah,
That person who they're covering has already clocked out and is gone.
correct.
So the next time, and this is between the firefighters, I understand what you're saying, but it's off the books. So the next time a firefighter wants to cover or is repaying that person 6 hours or whatever, they're going to come in and they're going to clock in,
Correct.
Okay.
and the other person is not. So the person that is working is actually getting those hours, and they're not going to come in to cover. That's what I'm saying. I don't understand the point. If they're here and they're working, they're getting paid. If they're not here and they're not working, they're not getting paid.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, if they work more than they're supposed to, they're gonna get overtime.
That's correct.
What you're doing is you're costing the city money by doing it that way. If they just repay the hours,
Well,
you understand what I'm saying? It's just, this just affects shift workers.
Yeah, it's the same difference. But keep in mind, this is just a policy and procedure.
Yes, sir.
If there's something that we find out we need to change
Yeah,
because it's
that's
not
what-
working, we just come back
That's
and we
why I
change
brought
it.
this up, yes, sir.
Okay,
If for substitutions, like, that's what it's called, substitutions, right? Just interchanging.
so Bert's gonna call you, so you can explain it to him, and then he's gonna go talk to
Oh, I
firefighters
understand
and
it
police
completely,
officers.
but to me, we're handcuffing our shift workers, in my opinion, and I can have an opinion.
You-
but
you
I
certainly
don't, I
can.
don't understand how we're handcuffing them. We're not saying that they can't trade.
Yep, okay, well, wait a minute, let me
We're
take that back.
simply- we're
What we're doing is
simply-
for cost of the city money. You're gonna be paying firefighters overtime whenever all they're doing is trading time.
I'm not,
Know what I'm saying?
I'm
you're
not
not.
sure if at the fire department at this time that they are doing that. I don't know if
Oh, I bet they are. You
do
work for,
substitutions.
okay.
They're not gonna get any more overtime than they normally would get because they're still working for each other's shifts, so the hours should balance out.
The only way that it
if you
would,
don't pay
the only
back
way
the
that it wouldn't balance out is that if they were straddling that 28-day work period. So if one person covered a shift in one and then they were paid in the other, that's the only way it wouldn't balance out. But it's still on an average, balances out.
If you say so.
as long as it's covered in the 28 days.
Yeah, as long as it's covered in the 28 days. And I will say that on this topic, the firefighters for a long time they could pick up a shift. They could be on the first day of their 28-day period, they could pick up a shift, and they were getting overtime for that without having worked any hours within their 28-day period.
Okay, that doesn't have anything to do with the time clock. I'm just saying.
Well, I
in my-
understand that, but when you're talking about saving money, that no longer is the policy of the fire department. They work 212 hours, and in accordance with FLSA, anything above 212 hours is what they get overtime on. So we're saving the city a tremendous amount of money on overtime starting from last month going forward.
So far, it's working. Okay, one last shot. Cynthia, anything?
I'm okay with this and.
Bert?
No problem.
You two are okay? Jim?
I had one more thing.
Okay, Jim, go ahead.
Going back to the discussion, and yes, I am opening Pandora's box, but when that discussion offline is had, I think we have a much larger potential liability if someone's working without being on the clock than we would have by having things straightened out and possibly paying an hour's overtime here and there. If they're out here working and not on the clock, we have a huge workers' comp, we have liability issues, all sorts of issues that, because they're not officially here. And I think that's a liability I don't think we need.
That is a large FLSA liability, particularly if somebody doesn't pay them back.
Right.
That was exactly the point I was gonna make. From that perspective, it is setting a dangerous precedent from that. I mean, you have to be on the books to be covered by the city's insurance. And if you're just working for somebody and not officially here, then are you or aren't you, and what kind of situation does that put us in? If somebody gets hurt or seriously hurt, and they're just covering for someone else, I think that there's a risk that the city incurs there. I get what Bert's trying to say, it's wonderful, right? You
Yeah.
know, but I think that the federal government would cause us a problem if we had somebody working more than 40 hours a week, if they were a 40-hour-a-week person, and not compensating them with time and a half. We'd be violating some federal laws on that rule, probably.
And most FLSA lawsuits come from the fire department.
I worked in the,
And the other, I mean, there are other things, right? That's why the IRS doesn't let you to barter. I mean, because you're not doing, you're doing all sorts of different things that violate some federal standards on that. So I understand what it may very well be happening, but I think that there should be a policy that prevents that from happening or allows it to work in a certain method to where it still complies.
With
Yeah.
record keeping,
When-
it would
yeah,
require
take a
lots
lot of
of
record
record
When we
keeping.
initially went with the time clock back in, I think it was November of last year for admin, court, and who else? Was that it?
All of admin.
All of admin.
Everybody but the police department and the fire department.
Yeah, it was being tested, and it's worked really well. And it simplifies the whole payroll process for the city treasurer. And so at that time, we said we were gonna be testing until this time, when we would transition and put PD and fire on it, which is what they've done. And it's turned out to be very efficient and speed up the process. It eliminates a lot of errors because there's not a lot of hand doing time cards and everything. It's just all streamlined, and so far it's working. And keep in mind, this is a policy just for internal use, and if something turns up where it's not working, we'll just change it and bring it back.
If I can ask April one thing, how long has it been in the police department,
A full, almost 2 pay periods now.
and how's it working?
Good. They went through a whole payroll, no complaints, everything worked well, so.
Okay. Thanks, April. So we've had our discussion. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll call the question. All in favor of approving these amendments to the Personnel Policy and Procedures Manual, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Okay, last up is number 14, which is a discussion and direction only, and this is on motorized scooters. We have had a person inquire as to whether we would allow scooters in the city, and looking at a lot of ordinances. Selena pulled some out of San Antonio, Almas Park, and some other cities. They all seem to be having regrets about it. We can prohibit the use. The only real logical use would be in Old Town, and the question comes, do we want scooters in Old Town and littered everywhere? But the hope here is that we can discuss it with the information that's here, get any questions you have, and then come back later with either an ordinance to prohibit the use of scooters and other similar vehicles in the city, or come up with an ordinance to allow it. So we don't really need a motion on this since there's no action. So we'll start out. Alex, how about we start with you?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with the thought to not permit the scooters within the city. I haven't had a lot of experience with them, but I can tell you that I've watched the use of them in my commute to and from work. I go through parts of San Antonio where they're there, and it makes me, as a driver of a vehicle, extremely nervous when they're there. Obviously, these places are trying to, they're trying to, I guess, follow San Antonio's ordinance. I drive down Houseman Road all the way to past 1604 to I-10, and they're all along the side of the road. And I know that San Antonio tries to keep them off the sidewalk and try to keep them whatever. But what I see is people all weaving around when they're on them, making people get awful close to the traffic, could cause an accident on the road if they were to swerve out there. I know that the owners stack them up. There's like 6 or 7 of them right in a row, and invariably they fall over. They have lights on the bottom of them. They're shining into oncoming traffic. They fall on the sidewalks, and the owners can't stand there with them all day long, so they're going to be a nuisance in that sense. But I'm really more concerned about the safety of the individuals on them because, again, as noted in our packet, there's no restriction on age of the operator, whether or not they know how to use that, whether or not they know how to follow signage and rules and regulations. You could have an 8-year-old going down Bandera Road, and think they're perfectly fine. Helotes doesn't have a whole lot of sidewalks, which means they're going to be in the road. And I think that at this point, the safest thing for our citizens and for those who might want to use this is to ban them within the city. I do like the fact that it's with regard to the ones available for rent, and not necessarily the ones that might be personally owned. But it does beg the question about whether we would want a personally owned one running around everywhere as well, as whether we need to come back and look at that too sometime. Thank you.
Bart?
Okay. When it says scooters, Dave, you don't mean, and this is really, you're going to think it's a stupid question again, but you don't mean the handicap scooters, right?
No.
But that's what they're called.
No, I know. There's a specific term for motor-assisted scooters.
Okay, yes, motor-assisted scooters. That's, how do you think this handicap scooters, they have a motor?
No, I understand. What I'm saying is that is a particular term talking about.
Well, this one, if you read it, it says it's a 2-wheeled vehicle with both wheels touching the pavement, I believe.
And then we already have an ordinance allowing golf carts. Is a golf cart considered a fun vehicle?
No,
Okay, so we wouldn't be messing with our golf cart ordinance at
no,
all?
this is specifically to the motorized scooters, not electric bicycles, and not, I forget the other term, what was it, battery-powered vehicle or something like that, that can go up to 35 miles an hour. We're just dealing with the scooters, motor-assisted scooters, pocket bikes, or mini motorbikes, and that's taken right out of the transportation
That
cover.
was my next question. A pocket bike, to me, it's a it's a motorcycle, right? Can they be licensed? Can a pocket bike be licensed?
No, it says right here in the code, I'd have to
So what's,
find
I
it.
mean, I looked at pictures of them, they look, I think I see these things on the road.
Yeah, all I'm telling you is it's right out of the transportation code under motorized scooters, and so we just
My
included
question was,
all
can
three.
can a pocket bike be licensed?
What is a pocket bike?
That's what, I mean, you gotta take a look at it. It looks like the thing they call the blank rocket. It's a motorcycle. The things you go, they go flying down the road.
It says here, a pocket bike or mini motorbike means a self-propelled vehicle that is equipped with an electric motor or internal combustion engine having a piston
sir, I know
displacement
that.
of less than
My
50
question-
cubic centimeters.
My question is, can they can they get a license for them, a regular license to be driven on the street?
It said it is not designed for use on a highway and is ineligible for a certificate of title
There,
or
okay, that answers
license
my
under
question. I
Chapter
didn't read deep
501.
enough. Sorry.
Well, and I think the other thing is, I don't think we have all the answers for this yet. We're just trying to see whether y'all want to prohibit them
No,
or
I'm
not, so.
against it, because I was up at Home Depot today, buying some stuff, and there was one of these pocket bikes, but the pocket bike looked like it was almost, could have been used on the street. So
Just-
that was my question, but he's got the answer
Just
right
read
there.
that section right there.
Gotcha.
Okay. Cynthia?
I'm definitely against all of this, and I'm actually against the privately owned vehicles on public streets. If someone wants to have a privately owned vehicle and they want to ride their own properties, because there's some properties here that are quite large, they can ride around there. But I think they should be prohibited on the public streets and public sidewalks, as well as.
I believe there might be an issue there. We talked to, well, emailed back and forth with the city attorney, and there may be a problem with prohibiting privately owned vehicles like this. But we'll have all that information
Yeah,
when we
find out,
bring this
but-
back.
Because I just don't understand, why we would allow that. I mean, we're gonna let them go to Old Town and knock people down off while they're, especially during the events that we have there. Can you imagine? I mean, it's dangerous not only for the person driving, but for the people that are walking around. It gets very crowded there.
Yeah.
So, and I'm against the privately owned and the public right-of-ways.
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, it's already been said, I think, most of it, but one, I don't think we ought to have them, period. Two, there are issues, like we're discussing on a separate topic, bollards in Old Town, those would go right through. Bollards, there'd be no stopping whatsoever. Three, we found them at the entrance to Los Reyes Canyons, so they're that far out of
Those little
civilization.
scooters?
Those little scooters. And kids are taking them from their house to the bus stop, the school bus stop, and then dropping them off on the side of the road. So it's,
The rental kind?
yeah.
Wow.
And four, I just got back from a vacation in another country, and they were on boardwalks with thousands of people. They were weaving in and out at 35, 40 mile an hour, total traffic hazard and pedestrian hazard. And I don't see any reason why the city of Helotes needs, in our foreseeable future, to even have any idea that we need those sort of vehicles.
Okay. Alex, any follow-up?
No, sir, thank you.
Bert?
No.
Cynthia? Okay, so the consensus I'm hearing is that y'all would be in favor of looking at an ordinance that would prohibit the use of these vehicles.
Anti-missile
And we'll look and
devices
see
that might be fired at them,
If what?
missile devices that might be able to be fired at them or whatever.
Yeah, those two. But we'll come back with something here in the next meeting or two, once we get it all put together. Okay, that being said, that finishes up our agenda. So if there are no objections, we will adjourn. And we're adjourning at 7:59.